Imagine silence. Not the peaceful silence that comes after a long day at work when you can finally exhale and close your eyes. No, this is a different silence. The ringing, cottony, sticky silence of an empty kitchen at 5 in the morning when the city is still asleep, but you can't even close your eyes. In this silence, you can hear the hum of an old refrigerator, the drip of water from the faucet you promised to fix 6 months ago, and the pounding of your own heart. Thump, thump, thump. This is not the rhythm of life. It is a countdown. There's an envelope on the table in front of you, a plain white rectangle of cheap paper. There's nothing remarkable on it, just your name and the foundation's logo printed in faded blue ink. But for some reason, your hands tremble as you reach for it. The skin on your fingers is dry and parchment-like. You look at your hands and see not your own, but your father's. The same hands that for 40 years tightened screws, signed reports, built someone's houses and someone's future. These hands worked themselves to the bone because they believed in one simple fundamental bargain they made with reality. Work honestly today, and tomorrow will take care of itself. It was the greatest deal of the 20th century. A social contract written not in ink, but in the sweat and blood of generations. You were told the system is as reliable as a granite cliff. You were told, save a little every month, trust the professionals in expensive suits, don't ask unnecessary questions, and when the time comes, you'll get your golden parachute. You believed. Everyone believed. Because the alternative was to admit you were running on a wheel that was going nowhere. And now, after 35 years of nonstop running, you sit in this kitchen and stare at the envelope that should contain the finish line, the reward. The result. You pry open the envelope flap with your fingernail. The sound of tearing paper in the silence seems deafening, like a gunshot. Inside lies a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. You unfold it slowly, as if afraid the paper might bite you. Your eyes scan the lines, skipping over the polite formalities, the introductions, the thanks for your loyalty. You're looking for only one thing, a number, a final sum, something that should become your foundation for the remaining 15 or 20 years of your life. And then you find it. At that moment, time in the room stops. The refrigerator stops humming. The faucet stops dripping. All that remains is a coldness that begins somewhere around your solar plexus and slowly creeps up your throat, taking your breath away. You blink, hoping it's a mistake, that you forgot to put on your glasses, that a zero is missing somewhere. But the number doesn't change. It stares back at you from the page with cynical indifference. The amount printed in black and white is less than you expected, not by 10%, not even by 30%, it's half as much. It's more than just disappointment. It's a physical blow to the gut. In a second, everything crumbles. Plans for a lake house, dreams of travel, promises to help your grandchildren through college. It all turns to ashes right in your hands. You feel like you've gone to the bank to withdraw the contents of a safe deposit box you've spent half your life refilling, only to have the teller smilingly inform you that the box is empty, that rats ate it, or that the bank has decided to retroactively change its storage rules. But that's not even the scariest part. The scariest part comes a second later. It's the realization that there's no mistake. At the bottom of the page, in tiny print that's almost impossible to read without a magnifying glass, is an explanation. Market volatility, adjustment of inflation expectations, recalculation of survival rates, complex, dead, bureaucratic words that conceal a simple and brutal truth. You've been robbed. The robber didn't hide his face behind a mask or break into your house with a crowbar. The robber wore a tie, smiled on TV, and shook your hand at the polls. For 40 years, you've been sold the illusion of security. You've been sold the idea that the money you give to the system is sitting in a secure safe, waiting for you. But the truth, which is now slapping you in the face with this letter, is that there never was such a safe. All this time, your money wasn't sitting there. It was being spent. It was burning in the furnace of a giant locomotive that was hurtling forward, devouring the resources of future generations to maintain the illusion of prosperity today. A pension fund isn't a piggy bank. It's a giant bucket with a fist-sized hole in the bottom. You and millions of others like you have spent decades filling that bucket with water, trying not to notice that it was leaking out faster than you could fill it. You put the letter aside. The taste of coffee in your mouth turns sour, metallic. You look out the window where a gray, joyless dawn is breaking. Out there on the street, people are starting to come out of their houses. They're going to work. Young, full of energy, confident that everything will be different for them. They think that if they work harder, if they save more, if they choose the right funds, they will avoid this fate. You want to open the window and shout at them, warn them, tell them they're running toward the abyss. But you remain silent, because you know they won't hear. They're asleep, just like you were asleep until you opened that damned envelope. This is the moment of truth, the point at which your personal tragedy becomes part of a global statistic. You're not alone in this kitchen. Right now, at this very second, millions of people around the world are opening the same envelopes. In London, in Tokyo, in Paris, in New York. Different languages, different currencies, different foundation logos. But the horror in everyone's eyes is the same. It is the horror of a man who suddenly realizes that the lifeboat he spent his entire life paying for is actually painted on the side of a sinking ship. You've been told that old age is a time of relaxation. The golden years. A marketing lie dreamed up by advertisers in the mid-20th century to force you to work obediently and without complaint. Now you see the truth. Old age in this system is not a vacation, it's a struggle for survival. It's the humiliating process of counting change at the supermarket checkout. It's choosing between heating and medication. It's the dread of the mailbox, which only brings new bills you can't pay. You pick up the sheet of paper again. The paper feels heavy as lead. The numbers are the same. They won't change tomorrow or the day after. Mathematics is a cruel mistress. It knows no mercy and accepts no appeals. The system you were promised as a perpetual engine of prosperity was, in reality, nothing more than a complex redistribution scheme that only worked as long as there was a fresh supply of blood. But the blood has run out. And now the mechanism has begun to devour itself. And the first thing it's decided to bite off is your future. You're sitting in the kitchen. The sun has already risen, but it's dark inside. You understand that this letter is more than just a retirement notice. It's a deportation notice from the world of the middle class to a world of eternal need. And the worst part is, there's nothing you can do about it. It's too late. The train left 30 years ago when you signed the first letter without reading the fine print. Now all you can do is watch it disappear over the horizon, taking your dreams with it, and listen to the dripping of water in the kitchen. Drip, drip, drip. Like seconds of your life that you traded for emptiness. If you think the letter on your kitchen table is a mistake, an accident, or the result of one particular manager's poor performance, you're still asleep. Wake up. What happened to your account has nothing to do with bad luck. It's the result of betrayal. The most massive, cynical, and mathematically calculated betrayal in modern financial history. And it wasn't perpetrated by street scammers, but by those you called your protectors. The ones who wear expensive suits, sit in glass towers, and wisely talk about risk diversification on morning TV. Let's take a step back. Think about what you've been told all these years. What mantra has every financial advisor, every bank teller, every investing textbook repeated? They told you, don't put all your eggs in one basket. They sold you a strategy that seemed brilliant in its simplicity and reliability. It was called 60-40, 60% stocks for growth, 40% bonds for protection. It was explained to you as a law of physics. When stocks fall, bonds rise. This is your shield, your safety net, your insurance against financial storms. If the stock market starts to tremble, the safety of government debt will offset the losses and preserve your capital. It sounded logical. It sounded safe. It sounded like science. And you bought the ticket. Millions of people bought it. Pension funds around the world built their concrete foundations on this simple formula. It was an axiom, a dogma, a religion. No one dared question the sanctity of the 60-40 strategy. It would have been like questioning the law of gravity. But then came 2022, and physics broke down. Imagine you're driving a car. You're buckled up. You have the most advanced safety system. You're confident that if you hit a wall, the airbag will deploy and save your life. And then the impact happens. Metal crumples, glass shatters. But instead of inflating into a soft cloud and absorbing the impact, the airbag explodes, spraying shrapnel of nails and glass into your face. That's what happened to your briefcase. That's what happened to your pension funds. The shield that was supposed to protect you from the impact turned into a sword that pierced you right through. Bonds, that bastion of stability, that risk-free asset, collapsed. They fell at the same rate as risky tech stocks. For the first time in a century, the two assets, which were supposed to balance each other, plummeted into the abyss hand in hand. The market didn't just sag, it was gutted. This wasn't a correction. This was a massacre. And in this massacre, more than just a pile of money was lost. The very idea of passive accumulation perished. The idea that you can simply hand over your money to the system and sleep soundly. Why did this happen? Because you were lied to about the nature of risk. You were told that the investor's main enemy is falling prices. But they kept silent about the real killer, the silent, invisible, merciless predator that lives in the basements of central banks. This predator's name is inflation, not the kind of inflation they talk about in the news, showing a 2% rise in the price of eggs, but real monetary inflation, which destroys the very structure of money. When central banks started printing trillions of unbacked paper to put out the fires of the crisis, they signed the death warrant for bonds. A bond is simply a promise to pay you a certain amount in the future. But if the future itself depreciates faster than you can blink, that promise isn't worth the paper it's printed on. When rates rose, the value of old bonds plummeted. The math is simple and brutal. No one will buy your IOU at 1% if they can buy a new one today at 5%. Your safe assets have turned into toxic junk that no one wants to buy, even at a discount. So there you are, standing amid the smoldering ruins of your retirement account. You look at the advisors who sold you this strategy, and what do you see? You see fear in their eyes. For the first time, they don't know what to say. Their textbooks are out, their algorithms are failing, their models, built on 40 years of data, are useless because we've entered an era that wasn't in their databases. An era where money loses its meaning faster than it can be earned. You thought you were playing chess, with rules, strategy, and logic. But it turns out you're sitting at a card table with cheaters who change the rules mid-hand. They tell you, just wait, the market will recover. In the long run, everything will be fine. It's a lie. A blatant, vile lie, designed to buy them time to save their bonuses while you lose your pants. The long run worked when the economy grew organically. When money was generated by production, not the printing press, but now we live in a zombie economy. Your pension fund now resembles a ship that sustained a hole below the waterline. The captain is reassuring passengers over the loudspeaker, warning them of temporary turbulence and asking them to remain calm. But if you go below deck, you'll find the water already knee-deep and the pumps aren't working. Worse, you'll see the rats, those institutional investors and smart money, quietly lowering lifeboats and rowing away into the darkness. Meanwhile, you remain on deck, clutching your depreciated bond portfolio to your chest, hoping the orchestra will play on until the end. There is no protection. Hedging is dead. The old rules no longer work. Understand this now, before the icy waters touch your toes. What you thought was your life jacket is filled with rocks. And these rocks are dragging you to the bottom with mathematical inevitability. You have no one to blame but your own naivety. You entrusted your fate to a system that was designed not to make you rich, but to use you as fuel. And now, when the fuel runs out, the system simply tosses you to the side of history, like a spent battery. Welcome to reality. There are no insurance policies here. It's every man for himself. Let's step away from numbers and charts for a moment. Forget about interest rates, volatility, and indices. Look at the world through the eyes of a biologist studying a population in a closed ecosystem. Everything that happens in the economy is subject to the same cruel laws of nature as life in an anthill. If the number of ants bringing food becomes fewer than those consuming it, the anthill dies. This is not a question of ideology, politics, or faith. It's a question of calories. It's a question of the physical survival of the species. And right now, our global economic anthill faces a threat that cannot be solved by printing presses or new laws. We're out of ants. Imagine a gigantic banquet hall. It's endless, stretching to the horizon. Millions of elderly people sit at tables laden with delicacies. These are pensioners. They've earned this dinner. They've worked their entire lives, built cities, healed people, taught children. They hold government-issued invitations that guarantee them a place at this table for the rest of their days. They eat, laugh, and toast. They're confident the kitchen will continue to function forever. But if you look away from the tables and at those serving the food, those cooking in the kitchen, and those clearing away the dirty dishes, you'll see a terrifying picture. There is almost no staff. The few waiters scurry between the tables, bending under the weight of their trays. They are young workers. For every one of them, there are no longer 2 or 3 pensioners, as there were half a century ago, but 5, 6, 10. Every year there are more tables and fewer waiters. They are exhausted, they can't keep up, they drop trays, and the guests at the tables are starting to get nervous. They bang their forks, they demand the promised dessert. They don't understand why the service has become so terrible. They paid for this banquet with their taxes 30 years ago. Where is their food? This metaphor describes the pension system more accurately than any economic report. The pension system is not a savings account. The money taken from your salary in the 1990s isn't sitting in a safe. It was long ago spent on payments to the pensioners of that time. Your pension isn't your money. It's the money of those working right now. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, a financial pyramid legalized at the state level. A pyramid only survives as long as the base is wider than the top, as long as the influx of new depositors exceeds the obligations to old ones. But look at the world's demographic map. The base of the pyramid has crumbled to dust. We've stopped having children. They tell you the problem is economic. It's a lie. The problem is biology. In Europe, Asia, and America, birth rates have fallen below replacement level. We're not producing new taxpayers. We've created a society where there are more old people than children. It's a biological dead end. You can't print 20-year-old people on a 3D printer. You can't make them appear out of thin air at the behest of a central bank. A human being is a resource that takes 20 years to cultivate, and this resource has become the most scarce commodity on the planet. Governments see this. They see figures that make their blood run cold. They know that in 10 years, the system will simply be physically unable to meet its obligations. The money collected from workers is no longer enough to pay pensioners. Pension fund deficits are measured in trillions. It's a hole that can't be filled. And what do? They panic. They start devouring their own citizens to delay the inevitable. First, they raise the retirement age. They tell you, medicine has improved, people are living longer, you can work for a couple more years. It's a lie. It's a cynical attempt to force you to die on the job so they don't pay you a penny. They want you to be a donor to the system until your last breath. Then they start raising taxes. They reach into the pockets of the few young people still working and take half their earnings, killing any motivation to work. And finally, they turn on inflation. They devalue the pennies that do reach pensioners, turning payments into a mockery that can only buy bread and water. It's agony. The system is convulsing. It's trying to defy the laws of physics and biology, but nature always prevails. You can't build a perpetual motion machine of prosperity on a dying nation. Demographics are destiny, and that destiny is already written. Look at Japan. Look at Germany. Look at China. They have retirement homes the size of countries. There's simply no one to work there. There's no one to generate growth. There's no one to buy houses, stocks, or goods. And if there's no one to buy, prices fall, the economy shrinks, and the debt burden becomes unbearable. We are entering the era of the Great Pension War, a generational war. The young will refuse to pay for a banquet to which they weren't invited. They see that they have no chance of buying a home, no chance of accumulating capital, because everything goes to supporting an army of old people. And the old will demand theirs, waiving a social contract that is no longer worth the paper it's written on. It will be a brutal battle, a battle for resources, a battle for the last piece of bread on an empty table. There will be no winners in this war. There will only be survivors. And the survivors won't be those who rely on the state. The state is bankrupt, trying to hide its insolvency behind beautiful slogans. The survivors will be those who understand the biological reality. No one is obligated to feed you. No one will come to your aid when your strength is exhausted. The pyramid is collapsing. The bricks are already falling. And if you stand at the bottom, waiting for manna from heaven, you will simply be buried under the rubble. They call it the demographic transition. We call it extinction. The slow, painful decline of a civilization that has forgotten that money is just a shadow of real people. No people, no economy, no children, no pensions. The equation has been calculated. The answer is zero. Accept it. Understand it. And start building your own ark before the waters drown you. Because there are no lifeboats for you on the ship of state. You need to accept one simple, cold, and incredibly difficult thought. A thought that will upend your entire worldview and force you to reconsider every plan you've ever made for the future. Ready? Here it is. Retirement is a historical anomaly. It's a brief, random, and unrepeatable episode in human history that began in the mid-20th century and ended right now, before your eyes. What you've come to consider a natural human right, a well-deserved rest in old age, paid for by the state, was, in fact, a temporary aberration. It was a unique experiment made possible by a population explosion, cheap energy, and post-war reconstruction. The stars aligned, creating the illusion of paradise on Earth. But the stars diverged. The experiment is over. The lab is closing, and the test subjects, that is, you, are being thrown out onto the street. Throughout human history, people have worked until they could no longer stand on their own 2 feet. Old age wasn't a time for cruises, golfing, and babysitting grandchildren in a beach house. Old age was a time of dependence on family or poverty, and that's precisely where we're returning. To a world where the words retirement will sound as archaic and incomprehensible as serfdom or steam traction. You are the last generation to remember what that dream looked like. And you are the first generation to experience firsthand how that dream turns into a nightmare. Face it, the system isn't just broken, it's dead. Its heart stopped beating back in 2008, and since then, its corpse has been galvanized by trillions of printed money to create the semblance of life. But the stench of decay can no longer be masked by any perfume from central bank press releases. The state, that gigantic leviathan that promised to take you under its wing, is itself bankrupt. It has no assets. It has only debts and obligations it can't fulfill. When a politician is faced with a choice, pay you a fair pension, crashing the budget, or print candy wrappers, devaluing your savings to zero, they will choose the latter. Always, without exception. Because inflation is the quietest way to declare default without admitting it out loud. You must forget the glossy images from investment fund brochures. Erase them from your memory. Your future is not a gray-haired couple strolling along a white sand beach with glasses of wine. Your future, if you continue to sleep, is a 70-year-old man in a warehouse worker's uniform scanning barcodes for 8 hours straight because his Social Security payment isn't enough to pay the electricity bills. Your future is a line at a free clinic where you'll be denied an expensive operation because you're beyond the age of economic expediency. Your future is living in a world where no one cares about you but yourself. Sounds harsh? Absolutely. But it's better to be slapped in the face with the truth now, while you still have the strength and time, than stabbed in the back later, when you're old and helpless. This isn't pessimism. This is insider knowledge. This is what they talk about in closed clubs when the microphones are turned off. The elites know the social contract is broken. They're preparing. They're buying up land, gold, real assets, resources. They're building arcs. And they leave you with paper promises and numbers on computer screens that are worthless. The point of no return has been passed. We've crossed the Rubicon, beyond which the old rules no longer apply. You can't rely on a pension fund. You can't rely on a bank deposit. You can't rely on your country's currency. All of these are elements of a bygone era, an era when the word of the state meant something. In the new world that's coming at us like a freight train, the only value is what you personally control. Your skills, your health, your real tangible assets, beyond the reach of the digital hands of the tax service or the inflation tax. You need to stop being an investor in the popular sense. Stop feeding the system. Stop buying their IOUs. Stop believing that a graph going up to the right means wealth. Start thinking like a survivalist, like someone who knows the winter will be long, maybe even endless. Your job is to create a self-sustaining life support system. Your own micro-pension fund, unaffected by the whims of politicians and the madness of the markets. You have little time left. The window of opportunity is closing, while the music is still playing, while the lights are still on, while you can still trade colored paper for something real. Act. Don't wait for the alarm. The sirens are already wailing, but most people have their ears plugged with entertainment. They don't want to hear. They want to believe that everything will work out, that a wizard will arrive in a blue helicopter and show a movie for free. He won't. The helicopter was shot down. The projectionist ran off with the box office. The theater is on fire. This is your personal ultimatum. Life is giving you a checkmate. You have two options. The first is to close your eyes, dismiss this text, call me a panicker, and continue swimming with the current straight into the waterfall. This is the path of the majority, the path of the victim. The second is to accept cold reality, take responsibility, and start rowing against the current before your muscles cramp up. This is the path of the loner, the path of the realist, the path of the survivor. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Hear that sound? It's not the clock. It's your time to make a decision. The clock has been started and there's no stopping it. The hand inexorably approaches midnight, and when it strikes 12, the carriage will finally turn into a pumpkin. Will you have time to jump out? It's up to you. But remember, I warned you. And when one morning you wake up to a world where your savings have turned to dust, don't say you didn't know. You knew. You were just afraid to believe.